everyone. Welcome to The Obvious. My name is Sonny. I'm the COO of ABC Florida East Coast. I want to welcome you to episode number 17. How are you, Peter?
I'm well. Good to see you.
Excellent.
Good to see you all watching. I'm Peter Daiga. I'm the president and CEO of Associated Builders and Contractors, Florida East Coast chapter.
The Obvious podcast is a production of ABC Florida East Coast. Unless otherwise stated, the content reflects the opinions of the guests and the hosts, which is us.
And if you like The Obvious podcast, you can subscribe on all major podcast platforms such as Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and Spotify, among others, or watch the audio-visual version on YouTube. You can also follow The Obvious podcast on Instagram, X, and Truth Social, and you can always reach out to us via email at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. Links to all the social media feeds are in this episode's show notes. And if you want to help others find the podcast, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.
Peter, as
Light subject today?
light subject today. So I'm gonna give our audience a little insight into how we do things at The Obvious. As you know, Peter, we engage in absolutely zero show prep. So we show up and we just talk about whatever we want to
believe? I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, considering how well the podcast is doing and the content we've created, I think it's going really well. But we just show up and we kind of talk about whatever's on our minds and what's in the news, unless obviously we have a special guest like I know we have some guests coming up in our future episodes. But I wanted to, I know you and I have been accused of being news junkies as well, so I wanted to kind of talk to you about what's been happening with this really good-looking Italian guy who took out the United Healthcare CEO. Seems like the left has gone nuts for this guy. He's, I've heard a lot of killing people is bad, but, right, kind of conversations. And I wanted to kind of get your opinion on what you thought about that, sort of how, in a weird way, they have been able to sort of justify violence, right? And I heard Bernie Sanders say, well, he was a father of two, which really made me wonder, well, would it be okay if he was a father of one?
Right.
He wasn't a father at all?
Yeah.
Right?
There's so many comments of that nature that make you go like, huh?
That he's a father of two, that he was a married man, that it's near Christmas. I heard somebody say this, it was near Christmas. And I'm like, so if it wasn't near Christmas, it'd be okay?
Right.
It's just so strange.
Yeah.
The things
well,
that
I'm going to be
say.
really blunt with you. There was a big struggle to extradite him to New York. And quite frankly, I was questioning, can we even count on the officials in New York?
Yeah.
Because, it's people on the left, and the New York system is kind of widely recognized as being left of center. I mean, they went after the president for 4 years. And
They did?
and it's that same political spectrum that's, that has the butts and the,
Right.
because he's good looking, he's, somehow attractive or
Well,
can we even trust the New York system to prosecute the guy?
Well, it's interesting you bring up the New York system, right? Because guess who they did prosecute? The young man.
It's kind of to my point.
Yeah, the young man from the train, Daniel Penny.
Right.
Right?
Well, everybody on the train was for fear of their life. Mm-hmm.
He had multiple people helping him.
Yes.
He had people helping him.
And they went after him. So you got to ask. I saw, Alvin Bragg.
Bragg.
Is that Bragg?
Alvin Bragg,
talking about the, prosecuting this guy, So, which, by the way, let's be clear. I mean, this guy assassinated this man.
Literally shot him in the back.
I mean, he didn't even have the cojones
That's
to do it to his face. He came up behind him.
Yep. Shot him in the back.
So there's no in the week preceding this podcast, there was also an article that I caught my attention. I forget where it was. Maybe you have it there.
Yes, Washington Examiner. The title is "It's Time for a National Conversation About Left-Wing Violence" by David. And David, I'm going to apologize for butchering your last name. Harsani or something like that. Harsany.
So I think he's trying to get at this whole point as well, right? About, you can't have buts, about this conversation or, because he was an executive. Oh, and by the way, the other thing that's just out crazy in my mind is, the initial thought was not that this justifies it, right? But in a lot of people's minds, well, he had this horrible back pain and, apparently had a bad experience and whatever. Turns out.
Not even a patient.
Not even a patient.
Of United Healthcare, yeah. Fascinating, right?
Unbelievable. I mean, and how anybody can not categorically condemn this violence without their buts and without their, what's the word I'm looking for?
Do you remember this? You remember the baseball game where Bernie Sanders, I think it was a Bernie Sanders supporter, shot up the Republican Republican side and the.
That was I hate to think about how long ago that was. That was a long time ago now. But yeah.
And I don't remember, obviously the guy was lionized based on my memory, but the media didn't talk about that at all.
That was where Steve Scalise.
Steve Scalise from Louisiana, right.
So, yeah, on the top of my head, I can't remember when that was. But you bring up a point which I think we were talking in the prep or before the show starts. And the point of this journalist's article about time to have a national conversation, because it's really not anything new.
Yeah. That was 2017.
17. Yeah, so 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah. And that was a softball game, right? A Republican
versus Democrat.
Democrats were shooting up the Republicans back then. And in any event, the point is, this isn't really something new. So we could go back to, I think I obviously lived through this, but don't remember it. But there was a lot of violence in the 60s.
Yeah.
There was political violence in Puerto Rico and in New York with a lot of people that I think are current. I don't know did the current president, was that part of his 15,000 pardons? Or, some of those political people might have been part of that group. So anyway,
a lot of people.
The point is the left-wing violence has been around for a while, and it is, I think, time to have a conversation about it. But incredible how that same justice system in New York treated the one person, which is, again, why, in my mind, I'm not even confident we can have a good trial of this person. Are they going to make a defense that, after all, insurance is expensive? Right. Where does this slippery slope lead us? How many things can a person justify for doing violence?
Yeah, and something like which another thing I want to just kind of put on the table, right? Like the left loves to talk about privilege, but in this case, nobody's talking about the fact that this guy comes from money and has this wealthy family.
And isn't it funny how we had his manifesto right away?
Right away.
But this is other manifestos we don't. It's a little odd.
Yeah, I remember the Tennessee school shooting, which was
I don't think we still have
student. They buried that like you can't even imagine. They never talked about that, right? But this one came out right away. Like, there you go. This is why he did it. And I think it's interesting that Daniel Penny being found initially a hung jury.
That was a little bit of a miracle,
right,
for New York.
And then the way the prosecutor's office, the games that they played, no, that's fine. Then pretend it never happened.
Right.
Like our most serious charge, we'll just drop it.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll agree to go on the secondary charge. And it's interesting to me that even a jury that's as liberal as a New York jury.
So let's talk about the difference, because in a big part of the distinction between justifiable violence or homicide is got a long, like centuries, millennial.
Yeah.
Right? I think it might go back to being
Charlemagne.
Formalized, or I don't know, Thomas Aquinas, and probably others, and the church has had a long, so what truly justifies response? Well, you have to believe your life is in danger. Those are the only times, right? And there's some very narrow definitions of justifiable war as well, and very limited
You made me just think about the left's hatred for the Castle Doctrine. Remember that? When they said, when Florida passed the law, and how much the left hated that.
Yes.
Like, how dare you? Just because somebody's on your property doesn't mean your life's in danger.
Right.
They were threading the needle very carefully there. But in this case, it's fascinating to me. When I say this case, I mean Daniel Penny's case.
Historically, you have to believe there's no escape. There's not a way of removing yourself from that situation, and you have to feel that your life is in danger. Those principles just hold perfectly true for the Penny, I think, incident. You're on a subway that's moving down the tracks.
And he's not the only one who thought that. There were people helping him.
Multiple people.
Right? Multiple people thought.
Right.
That the homeless person was a danger,
right?
And they jumped
even at that, I think there were. I didn't follow the case super close, but he was putting him in a chokehold. It wasn't like he was shooting him with a gun or with a knife or anything like that. He certainly didn't have the intent of killing him.
That's a great distinction.
Anyway. So, but there's clear distinctions that it's time for us to talk about a little bit more again. We have to be a society and a culture where, because again, where does this lead? Everybody can justify something. Everybody's offended by something. And if we as a society go down that road where somehow it's okay to assassinate a CEO of an organization because we don't like the organization or because we think it's messed up or we think the system is messed up. Oh, and then there's another conversation to be had, which wasn't Obamacare supposed to solve our healthcare system problems?
Yeah.
I mean, it was many big federal programs that they push them through, they get them done, they're supposed to solve a problem, and the problem's not solved.
Yeah.
You know?
They never do. So this made me think of something else. When, I don't know if you got a chance to see, Donald Trump did an hour-long interview with NBC. I believe the reporter's name is Kristen Welker, who also does their Sunday morning show. And
So was his first interview after the election, that one?
No, it was just recently, about a week ago.
Yeah, I think it might have been his first interview after the election, that he sat down with somebody.
Yes, that he sat down, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, NBC, which has just hammered him, right? So one of the things that she was really hung up on was...
Did it cost him $10 million? Was it $10 million or $15 million? Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, that's ABC News.
Oh, sorry. Wrong network.
Yeah, wrong network.
Different amount.
That's the Stephanopoulos settlement. But this one on NBC News with Kristen Welker, she kept asking him again and again, almost badgering to the point about, are you going to prosecute your quote-unquote political enemies, right? And all I can think of is, last time, he didn't do anything to Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, he talked about lock her up, but he never actually pursued her in any way. Right. And then he gets prosecuted multiple times under the most tenuous of legal circumstances. You know.
And also different jurisdictions for all sorts of different things.
Georgia,
many of them thrown out. Many of them a unanimous decision one of them a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court.
Right.
I mean, you got everybody on the Supreme Court saying this was unconstitutional. I mean, how bad does it have to get? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, and I remember the judge from New York who is somehow now an expert on appraising property, saying that Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 million, right? Like that kind of stuff. It was just...
Yeah, never mind that the parties interest involved didn't have a problem. The banks didn't have a problem, right? We talked about this.
There was no victim in that
problem.
case.
There was no victim.
In that case. Yeah. And they're running around saying, oh,
Except for a leftist, somebody who thinks you overvalued your properties on your books.
But he still paid the taxes on it, right? He doesn't... Right. I mean, it's fascinating to me how they prosecute him repeatedly.
Yeah. And then
worried about what he will do when he has no record of
exactly. That. So, yeah, it is a little odd. I've on behalf of ABC done a couple interviews where people want to talk about tariffs and how bad that's going to be for the industry, and I have to just constantly tell them what happened
last
4 years ago.
Yeah.
What happened the last 8 to 4 years ago. You know. Last I recalled, I mean, it was pretty, inflation was pretty low, supply chains were pretty good, our industry fared pretty well.
The tariffs that he put on China are still in place.
Yeah.
Biden never took them off.
Yeah.
Right?
Isn't that funny? Interesting.
They're still there.
Yeah.
And it's
kind of the same thing. It's right. You don't have to speculate about these things because he was president.
We have a history.
4 to 8 years ago. We have a history. Did he go after his, enemies then?
No.
I remember in the campaign, it was all of us loved, people do those kind of things, lock her up, but
he never did.
He didn't even prosecute her or put, have something go after her. But in any event, I'm with you. I think, for them to do an interview with him and then start to ask about, well, why don't you just go back? Why don't you actually go report about what happened during the first Trump administration? That would probably be our best insight into what the second administration is going to be.
But it's fascinating to me how our media does such a great job on attacking the right on hypotheticals and ignores the left on actuals, right? Like, it's fascinating to me that the reality on the left gets ignored. The hypothetical on the right just gets hammered again and again and again.
Yeah. This is such an important conversation because, violence is, it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem in this country. It's a problem in, I don't know, maybe the world, Western civilization. I mean, I think it really is time to have a conversation about violence in general. What kind of things have led to this? Without getting too controversial, what do we allow in our culture that, if you can justify that, then why can't you justify good-looking a young kid who people think you're my Robin Hood, my Robin of my, I don't know, and justify assassinating somebody in the back of the head at 5 a.m. or whatever time it was, 6 a.m, because he runs a corporation that makes a lot of money and in an industry that is broken, even though Obamacare was promised to fix it.
Yeah. One of the points I wanted to bring up, and this isn't my point, this is from the Washington Examiner article on the left-wing violence, is the October 7th attack in Israel and specifically the issue with the rapes and how the liberal feminists have just ignored, right? And I haven't researched the issue well enough to say they've all ignored it, but I have, and certainly in mainstream media, I've yet to read anything from the left criticizing the violence towards women that happened in Israel on the 7th of October. And then subsequently, I know a bunch of the former hostages have given interviews where they've kind of talked about that, right? Yeah. And so this idea that Trump's a rapist and Trump's done this and Trump's that, like that gets so much press. But then when it actually happens to women in this large scale, they just ignore it.
Yeah, I think the left's got a problem of power over, even principle in a way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I saw an article also very recently where it talked about the LGBTQ, whatever it is today, community and how they got behind the cabinet nominee of the Biden administration of Pete Buttigieg for transportation. Yet I think President Trump has nominated someone from the economics. I don't know.
It's the Treasury Secretary.
Treasury Secretary.
Yep. So first gay Treasury Secretary ever.
And that community is silent.
Yep.
I mean, here, you can't get behind saying, way to go, thank you for a point, So to my point, I think it's more about Scott Bessent.
Yeah.
It's more about power. I think in many cases, who's going to bring our power to rather than, the true principles, if you will, of being a feminist and supporting women or being a LGBTQ community and supporting, regardless of whether it's Trump or Biden, that's, appointing those people. So, any event, hopefully we can be part of that national conversation. I don't know.
Do you remember another name I'm going to add to Scott Bessent's name? Do you remember Rick Grinnell?
Oh, yeah. He's on Fox News periodically, right? Yeah. They interview him in his house down in Brazil, or is he in Brazil now? Or didn't he get nominated?
Yeah, he got nominated. Trump nominated him last term for ambassador of Germany, and then I think he had a position in the intelligence post as well.
Okay.
And he was the first gay person to have that position.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me how the media just completely ignores it.
Yeah.
And just everything that he has done. And I think he's about to get another intelligence position as well. So I think it's fascinating how, look, media's hypocrisy is kind of a well-known fact, but I think the impact that this cultural change that we're seeing and how Luigi Mangione, I believe is how you say his name, is being treated versus how Daniel Penny is being treated. Daniel Penny is also like 25 years old,
right.
And he did this interview that I saw, his first interview post the not guilty verdict, and he was like, I would do it again. Because he's a Marine, and he's like, I can't sit back and watch people, innocent people, suffer.
Right.
And he wasn't trying to kill Jordan Neely. That was the name of the homeless person that just came to me. He wasn't trying to kill him. He was trying to just, with help from other people, just trying to subdue him.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody that might be, although I doubt it, but that might be listening to our podcast, and when we say things about Luigi, they might be thinking, but, or they might just have a shadow of a thought in their mind, but that industry has so screwed so many people's lives. I mean, what do we say, to have this conversation? Because we need to have it.
We do.
Violence,
we do.
There's a problem with violence. We focus a lot on the wrong things, like the guns or the, but really I'm more interested in what gets somebody in their mind to the point where they think it's okay to hurt other people.
I think it's what the education system does and what the media does. I think you constantly, you carry this out to its logical conclusion. In Florida, homeowners insurance has become insanely expensive.
Right.
Are those CEOs next?
That's right.
Are we going to be like, what are you doing to all the retirees in Florida?
Right.
This is nuts, right? Like at some point, car insurance has become tenuously expensive. Yeah. Go after the Geico CEO or State Farm CEO. I mean, that's...
Anyway, let's have a conversation. about violence, and hopefully we've contributed something to it. I think it's something that's long overdue. We need to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
So it impacts us all. The potential for, going down that slippery slope, whatever that next step is tragic. Really, if we don't
tragic,
address it,
we have to address it. We have to talk about it. And we have to talk about it honestly. Like you can't, and you have to talk about it. One of the reasons I brought up Steve Scalise and we kind of talked about past events. This famous line just occurred to me. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like the play?
Right.
But we have to kind of remember the context in which these things happen. There isn't just like one incident that's sort of by itself.
Yeah, there's a funny meme has been going around for some time about the whole Lincoln reference. Kind of got me that people haven't been this mad since. I don't know if you've seen that meme.
I haven't seen the meme, but I'm sure our Mr. Producer will put it on the screen.
So, all right. So, hopefully, we've started a good conversation, which is why we try to do this podcast.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate you all. Thank you for listening and honoring us with your time. And we look forward to sharing another episode with you very soon.
Excellent. And for your comments, send us an email at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.